Greetings, everyone. My name is Sanjeev Venkatram, and welcome to another edition of User Delight with Microsoft Technology. What we're going to do today is to look at how we could access ChatGPT, Turbo 3.5 specifically, in Microsoft Power Virtual Agent, which is essentially a chatbot. The scenario here is that we as consultants, let us say, if we were to access information from ChatGPT, we could actually do it in a secure environment from inside a virtual agent. And then once we get this information, and a view of this is down here on the left-hand side here, I'm looking for frontline worker information in the med devices industry as an example, right? So once I get this information, I could actually elegantly store this information in, let us say, SharePoint, ask my manager for approval if we could actually take this and make some kind of a SOP out of this and then bring it internal to the organization, right? So that's kind of the scenario. In fact, actually, there are multiple possibilities with this, okay? With this as a background, let us see how we can actually do this, okay? So I'm gonna end this presentation here and let us actually head on over to our Power Virtual Agent. I'm going to just make sure that I'm recording this. Seems like okay. So Power Virtual Agent is a component of Microsoft Power Platform, which is basically an overarching platform in which we have got apps, we've got BI, we've got virtual agents, we have got automation, so on and so forth. Okay. So what we're going to do is basically go in and sign in to this environment. So this is powervirtualagent.com, and then go in, we sign in. And then this lands us in a page where we'd be able to create our first bot, right? And I'm pretty sure some of you folks have been exposed to this before, but we'll actually start from scratch, okay? So on the left-hand side here, we click on chatbots to literally start our app. So I'm going to actually click on chatbots. And there are a number of apps around here, so I'm going to make a new chatbot. I'm going to call this ChatGPT with PVA, Power Virtual Agent, okay? And the language is English here. I'm going to actually create this. So this goes away and sets up our bot. And as you will see, we get into a canvas, much like Michelangelo's canvas, which acts as a designer in which we can very easily or relatively easily design our bot. Okay, so this takes about 30 seconds or so, and there you go. Here's our bot environment, right? So on the, let me go left to right here. So on the left-hand side, you see an overview of the entire environment. Then you get into topics, and essentially topics are basically containers, is how you could look at it, where you go in and design a set of communication within that container, right? And essentially a topic. And if you want to, you can have an intro topic, then hand it off to a more substantive topic, so on and so forth. You can have as many topics and go from one to the other. You can track between topics as the test bot up here says so. Then you get into entities, and entities you could basically look at as, let us say, tables. There is analytics on the left-hand side that gives you a little bit around the performance of the bot itself. Then you get into publishing of the bot into various different sources. We'll actually do that in Teams, in Microsoft Teams, and then settings, and so on and so forth, okay? So let's begin. We are going to click on topics here, and you will actually see some default topics up here, such as greetings and lessons and thank you and goodbye and so on and so forth. There are some system topics as well. What we want to do here is to basically go ahead and take off all these, like, you know, we'll basically say, hey, we don't want any of these topics right now because we want to go ahead and create our own topics, right? So I'm literally going to like turn off all these topics here. I think I just did that one. So it'll take about less than, let's say, a minute for us to go ahead and turn all these off. And you will see what happens when we turn these off is I'm going to go over to the system topics as well and literally turn them off. And you will see that the on the left-hand side in the test bot here, the first conversation is actually defaulting to a conversation that is there by default in either the topics or the system topics, if I'm not mistaken, conversation start, I think. So what we'll do is by turning all these off, if I were to go ahead and refresh this, you will actually see I have nothing. So I literally can design my own topic from the get-go. So I'm basically going to go add a topic right now from blank. Incidentally, you could create it from a Copilot, but I will start from scratch, right? So we'll say from blank, and then this basically gives us a trigger, to start a conversation, right? So you have triggers, you have actions, you have conditions, so on and so forth, and you keep repeating that over again. In this case, there's a trigger. I'm going to basically edit the phrases here. This goes ahead and gives me the properties here. I'm going to say greetings, hi, hello, hello, so on and so forth. You can actually make your own set of greetings, right? So once you basically say hello, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask a question here. I'm going to say, greetings, I am your personal virtual assistant, if I can spell that right. I call myself Genie, right? And how may I assist you today? Could I get you information from ChatGPT, right? Be a bit direct here, right? And then when I ask a question here, I could capture the response in multiple ways. I could say, hey, multiple choice, but not in this case. But I could go ahead and say, hey, give me the entire response from the user, right? Give me that entire response from the user. And I'm going to capture that in a variable. I'm going to go click on this variable here, and I'm going to say var underscore user underscore response, right? So that's going to be my user response. And then I'm going to basically limit it to this particular topic, right? So once I get the response, what I'm going to basically then go do is I'm going to go over and call an action, right? And this is where I connect to what's called as Power Automate within the Power Platform umbrella and go in and connect to GPT. So let's see how. So I'm going to go to call an action, right? Call an action here, and I'm going to go create a flow. So what this does is that it invokes Power Automate, and as you will see, the starting point obviously is your virtual agent. So that's the handoff point from the virtual agent to Power Automate, as you can see. And from here, we connect to ChatGPT, so on and so forth. So let's actually first off add an input, a text variable, which is going to be the user's response. So I'm going to basically say here, user underscore response, right? User underscore response. This is going to be a text field. And from here, I'm going to initialize a couple of variables. And you just have to follow me now, and we'll actually see why. So I'm going to basically go ahead and say add an action, and I'm going to search for a variable here. So I'm going to initialize a variable, much like how you would initialize a variable in your programming, right? So I'm going to call this my var variable, and this is going to be a string variable. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually add another variable, and I'm going to again type variable here and initialize a variable, and I'm going to basically call this my var1, and then this is also going to be a string, right? And then from here, this is where I actually add the HTTP action for it to go connect to the API, the OpenAI API, and set the question to ChatGPT, bring the response back and parse it out and send it back to virtual agent. So I'm going to go type HTTP here. Now this clearly is a premium connector, which means to say you need to have a license to Power Platform or Power Apps. A Power Apps per user license will do, or a Flow license will do rather. So I'm basically going to go do the drop down and I'm going to do a post. The URI over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my Azure OpenAI, right? And when I go to OpenAI, I'm going to go to API here. Clearly, that's what I want. So it signs me in. I've signed in before, so it signs me directly in. And when I go in, if I were to click on my profile, I will actually be able to see my API keys, right? So if I were to click on it, it basically, you can go ahead and actually create a new secret key. Clearly, I've actually done that before. Then once you have the API key here, and you could look at multiple things. You could look at rate limits. You could look at, if you are a paid member, you can look at your billing, so on and so forth, and settings, whatnot. I'm not going to get into that component of it. Suffice it to say that you've got this, okay? So you have your API key, and I'm going to then go over to the playground, which is where we can actually test this. And here what I'm going to say is, what are the top 3 frontline worker profiles in healthcare, right? Merely just ask a question here, right? I'm not going to submit. I'm just going to ask a question. And then if I were to say view code, and then it gives me the code either in Python or Node.js, so on and so forth, I could literally take this, put it in my Python editor, run this, and it'll run perfectly fine, right? But instead, I'm going to actually go to curl. So that gives me the URI. So I'm going to copy this here, go back over to my Power Platform, and then paste that there. Now the headers here, basically where it's showing us the headers. Content type is application JSON, and then you have authorization as the key value pair. So you've got authorization here, and the bearer has the API key. So I'm merely going to copy this guy here, content type, paste that there, and then the pair basically is application JSON, paste that there as well. Go back out here, the authorization, copy this. It's right in front of me, and I'm very poor at typing. And then basically this has bearer and the API key, so I'm going to copy that. And then you don't want to be making spelling mistakes here. This is my API key, so I'm going to paste that there. So I'm all set, right? Now, if I were to go back to OpenAI, here, this component here actually gives us the JSON which gets sent to ChatGPT for it to do its thing and then return back our result, right? So, and content clearly here is a variable that we can pass in from our virtual agent. So I'm going to go put that in the body like so. And in content where it's got all this, I'm going to take this out, and I'm instead actually going to use the dynamic content here and get the variable user response like so, right? The user response like so, okay? So now what we could do is we could rename this flow, and I'm going to call this GPT Explorer virtual agent flow agent, if I could spell it right, flow. And clearly this is a mouthful, but I'm gonna, my creative juices, I suppose, are running low right now, so I'm gonna basically just go save this, right? I'm gonna basically just go save this, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to run this by passing information from my chatbot, right? So if I were to say save and refresh, I'm going to cancel this here. If I were to say, well, I'm going to save the bot first off, right? Save it. And then once this is actually saved, I'm going to add a call and action here, right? So we have the question here with the user response. So I'm going to go ahead and say call an action, and click on GPT Explorer right there, right? So I'm going to click on GPT Explorer here, and the user input basically is going to come from the var user response, right? So let us actually run this. So I'm basically going to go over, well, first of all, I'm going to go over to the management layer of the flow here so that we can see our runs as it comes through. And then here I'm going to initialize the flow. I'm going to say hi. And then this goes away and says, okay, you know, what can I do for you? And I'm going to say, what are the, or literally just say, top 3 frontline worker profiles in healthcare, right? And I'm going to actually pass this over to the flow. Now, clearly, this is not going to work because I'm not getting any output here. But if I were to go over to my flow, and this has succeeded, right? So this is run. Now, the reason for running it this way is if I were to go over to my HTTP action, I will actually be able to see the body here of the flow. So I'm going to copy this over because I'll need this to parse the JSON and be able to extract the contents. As you can see, there is content here. I want to be able to extract that. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to edit this, and then I'm going to parse JSON. So this takes a few seconds for it to load. I'm going to basically add a data operation here, and I'm going to call this parse JSON, and then down below here you'd be able to see the parse JSON action. And then when I click on the content, obviously I want the body from before, and in the generate from sample, I'm going to copy this entire thing, right, where it has got the output, right? It's got the output, like, you know, the content here. So I'm going to say, hey, I need this as an example. So it goes away and generates the schema. Now, once the schema has actually been generated, I can go ahead, I can call an action and then say, you know what, the variable that I have, my var, I want the output, the contents to be captured in that. So I'm going to basically say set variable. So this goes ahead and says, okay, Sanjeev, here is the option. So I'm going to say my var, and here what I want is I want the content, and because there could be multiple lines, this is most likely going to get looped in. So I'm going to click on content, and as you see, it's got choices, so it's basically gone in and then added a loop applied to each, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the output of that and I'm going to actually add it to my second variable, right? So I'm going to say add an action here, and again I'm going to say set variable, and then I'm going to capture in this, which is my var1, I'm just going to capture the prior variable, right? So whatever is in this one, I'm going to capture it in a variable, and then I'm going to return it back. If I would say add output, I'm this is a text, and then say what did we call this one here? This is user response, and then I'll just call this as GPT response, right, to the user. And in this, I'm going to pass my variable 1, and that's about it. I'm going to save this. Now this flow is done, and let us see what happens when we test this, right? So we could basically test this flow with the prior trigger that just succeeded. So I'm going to test this and see if the flow actually runs. Now clearly it's not going to pass it to the virtual agent, but at least it should actually go to ChatGPT, pull the information, and then in variable 2, we should be able to see one line item. As we can see here, it is passing, it is getting us these 3, and that's about all we want, right? So this works perfectly. So I'm going to actually like go back to the management layers to make sure that we see the flow running. And then I'm going to go over to my chat here, and then I actually get the GPT response. Here is the output. And then out here, I'm basically going to say, you know, here's your response. So if I go to this variable now, I'll be able to get GPT response, and that's about it, right? So I'm going to save this, and let us see what happens when I run this, right? So I'm going to basically say greetings. Whoops. I'm basically going to say greetings in this case. And then while it actually comes back with a message, I'll say top 3 frontline workers in healthcare, right? And then pass this. So the flow runs now. This user input has been handed off to the flow, and the flow is getting the information from GPT, and voila, here is a response, right? This is a response. Now, if need be, we could take this, right from the flow, send it to Teams for an approval to our manager so that the manager can go in and see that, and then from there actually take it over to SharePoint. That's not too hard to do. In the flow right here, we could configure the flow to basically send this message over to a team. If I edit this, and if I were to go up here and then say add an action, I could actually start an approval process, right? So I could say approval here, and I could start and wait for an approval as an example, and then say, first to respond, in which case I'll be sending it just to my manager, first to respond here. So this opens up the approval card, and I can say, kindly review GPT output, GPT output, and basically click on, my var1, or I could basically go ahead and add a few other comments from the user response. Let us say, GPT output for, the user response here, and then assign it to, in this case, myself. I'll just say MOD administrator. And then in the details, I'll say, kindly review and approve the following, right? And I am going to enter the my var1, right? So this goes to the manager to approve, make edits, so on and so forth, completely up to how you want to handle this, right? So if I were to save this now, and from here, once the manager approves it, you can put it back into, you can add a condition, and you can put it back into SharePoint, so on and so forth. I'm not going to do that here because that's a classic approval flow. I'm just going to save this here, which I'm sure you actually know, right? So I'm just going to save it here because I don't have a SharePoint list. I wasn't planning on doing that. I'm just showing you here. So if I were to click back here and rerun this, right, and if I were to go back to my bot, right, clear this, say hello, and top three frontline workers in banking, right, and then send this over. So it's actually going to go first to Teams, right? The flow is going to run. And then if I head on over to my Teams, I should actually see an activity light up here, right? I should actually see an activity light up here. Let us see what's going on. Well, in this case, I should redo this. I should actually redo this because the flow most likely is not going to run because, well, it is actually running, interestingly. And there you go. There is the activity, and it actually came through. Surprise, surprise, right? I thought that I'd actually have to save the flow in Power Automate, but no, it is actually updated. So the approval comes in here, and the manager actually sees this. If the manager wants to edit it, they can comment about it, so on and so forth, and say, hey, look, the bank teller is fine. I would be careful about the representative, whatever he or she wants to say. They'll add their comments, and that's about it, and approve this, right? So this information then can actually be brought into SharePoint, and within your chatting here, it has got this information over anyway, but you could also send the approver comments as well, right? The edited comments can actually be sent here. So the possibilities literally are endless, okay? So I'm going to actually save this topic. I'm going to call this GPT Explorer, right? And I'm going to and add my initial maybe, and then save this topic. So this is all done, and you could add other things. You could ask for a survey, so on and so forth. You could do many things, right? And once this is actually done, I'm going to basically publish this bot, right? So this bot now, this content is ready and it is ready to be published for folks to actually use, right? So once this is published, I could go over to settings and I could go to channels on which I actually publish this. I could do a demo website, I could do Microsoft Teams, so on and so forth. So I'm going to basically go say Teams, and then I'm going to say turn on Teams. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say open bot. So this goes away and opens the bot. I'm going to cancel this and say use web app instead. Now clearly Teams should go in without any issues because I'm already here on Teams, so there shouldn't be any issue. So let's see. And lo and behold, Teams actually opening, and it basically tells me, hey, look, there is a bot, add this, and the bot now gets added. I'm going to dismiss this. So the bot now gets added here, and I can chat with it, right? I can basically say hi, and it goes in, and it's a similar experience to what you saw on Power Virtual Agent. Well, there you have it. So what have we done here? We're basically getting GPT information through a chatbot. Then if you want to, you can actually send it over to your manager for approval before you store it and make an SOP out of it. Or you could basically review it for yourself. Either ways are fine. And you're actually reviewing that information in Power Virtual Agent, right? You're connecting, you're talking to Power Virtual Agent first, and then you go in, you add a topic. To summarize, you add a topic, and then in your topic, you basically configure the flow in such a way that it goes away, captures the user input, takes it over to GPT through Power Automate, brings it back, and then surfaces the information over to the user. Or you could actually take that information over to your manager for them to check, or your team members to check, and then based off of their inputs, you finally actually make an SOP out of it. All right. I trust this was useful. Thank you so very much, and have a wonderful, wonderful time with ChatGPT and Power Virtual Agents. Thank you so much.